Good evening, everyone. Hello, Trinity Tigers. I hope everyone is doing well. Welcome to the Learning Together live webinar series as part of a lifelong learning initiative presented by Trinity University, Office of Alumni Relations. I am Beth Bando Bontley, class of 75, an actress, author, seminar leader, acting, and life coach. And I am grateful that Trinity's Office of Alumni Relations has invited me to moderate tonight's webinar and engage with conversation with the distinguished panelists on the richness of the legendary Paul Baker's teachings and philosophy, specifically integration of abilities. It is my distinct pleasure to present Joan Meister, class of 69, Wes Dixon, class of 75, and Robyn Baker Flatt, Professor Baker's daughter, co-founder and executive artistic director for the Dallas Children's Theater. One of our goals tonight is to offer you an overview of ideas about the life-enhancing benefits of being creative and being a lifelong learner, especially from the perspective of integration of abilities. And we consider that that is the arc of our webinar theme this evening. Let me begin, if you will, by discussing some of my own takeaways from the Baker philosophy. From my perspective, there was an underlying component that was alive and well in our theater department that for me is encapsulated in one word: freedom. When we had an idea, it meant something. It was honored, and we were encouraged and expected to follow through on it. As an actress, I have never felt as free in my art form as I was back in the Paul Baker days of Trinity. This freedom of ideas and freedom of expression led to the second building block for me: instinct. There was an instinctual connection, thanks to the integration of abilities approach, between the actor, the character, and the text, in which magic happened. The next organic block for me was trust. When you have the freedom to express your ideas, plus permission to use your instincts, trust is a natural byproduct. The freedom to trust my instincts has become a primary and pivotal foundation through which I live life. Now, I will add briefly that my next period of training after Trinity was the exact opposite of integration of abilities. It was rigid. It was an over-intellectualized process of the Stanislavski system. I felt fragmented within it, and I lost that sense of freedom. However, it birthed a curiosity in me, as creativity will, to learn about different approaches. It birthed a quest to discover and continue to discover how do you teach acting in a way that honors students' talents, that nurtures growth within the wholeness of who they are. It also gave a way for me to look at the brain and how both sides of the brain contribute to creation and wholeness. In fact, I have created a system of teaching artistic expression as a means of becoming whole. One of our panelists, Joan Meister, also has become fascinated with the brain connection with her passion for lifelong learning. And we're going to hear more about that in just a moment. So before we talk with Joan and our panelists, let me ask our audience a few questions. I would like to invite you to take a quick poll. Coming up shortly, you will see the answers, or the questions rather, coming up. on our poll content. And there they are. Were you a theater student? Have you taken integration of abilities? Do you feel that you have utilized something from integration of abilities as part of your art form or in your life? And we'll give you a couple of minutes to answer those questions, please. Okay. All righty, now I do not see the results yet. Here they are. Here we got them. Were you a theater student? 68% say yes. 32% no. Have you taken the integration of abilities class? 76% say yes. 24% no. And there's a third question. Oh, I see it. Move that little bar down. And there is the third question. Do you feel that you have utilized something from integration of abilities as part of your art form or in your life? 78% say yes. 22% say no. Thank you. Thank you for answering our questions. And let me also remind you that we have a Q&A tab that you can use to write your questions as you're listening to our panelists. We're not using the chat function in this seminar, and we will get to your questions later. So if you will, let's turn our attention to Joan Meister, class of 69. With the integration of abilities philosophy as her working foundation, Joan assumed many responsibilities in the field of arts and arts administration. She has taught and co-directed federally funded artists in the schools programs and is dedicated to lifelong learning. Joan, would you please share your takeaways? And would you begin by sharing your story about what led you to Trinity and your anticipation in meeting Professor Baker?
Yes, and thank you, Beth, for setting this amazing stage for this webinar. And applause and thank you to Salim and Trinity University's Office of Alumni Relations for focusing on Paul Baker and his Integration of Abilities course. Ken Bain, best-selling author of What the Best College Teachers Do, and in his recently published book, Super Courses, The Future of Teaching and Learning, names Paul Baker's Integration of Abilities course as a super course. So, well, what is a super course? Well, according to Bain, it's a course that helps students reach their full potential and equips them to lead happy and productive lives. I would like to add the unlimited potential in students. As I read Bain's book and his description of integration of abilities in chapter 11, my heart filled with joy and love and immense gratitude as tears rolled down my face. How lucky and blessed I was to take Paul Baker's class. It was a springboard to my career in the arts. As an arts administrator, I was the marketing director at Stanford University Lively Arts, as well as the coordinator of the Aesthetic Education Institute here in Denver, a program of young audiences, and as an arts educator in the Denver Public Schools. It was and continues to be my life's mission to share the IA philosophy and the tools that it taught me. So your question, Beth, what led me to Trinity and to study Paul Baker? Well, it was a phone call and a friend. It was the summer of 1964. I was visiting my friend Teresa. We were getting ready to start our senior year in high school. All of a sudden, we heard a phone ring in the background, and Teresa's mom, Harriet, walked into the room and she said, "Teresa, it's for you. It's Paul Baker." Teresa took the phone and went into the other room, and soon she returned and said, "I'm so excited. Paul Baker, head of the drama department at Trinity University, invited me to apply to Trinity and to work in the drama department." "Wow," I said, "that is impressive." And I thought to myself, who is Paul Baker? Well, for me, it was a nudge and a kick in the seat of the pants to get going and focus and to try and figure out where I was going, because if you don't know where you're going to wind up someplace else. So I began researching colleges and decided to apply to Trinity. I was accepted and my college career began in the fall of 1965. I finished my freshman year, went back to second year, and it was the fall of 66 and the first day back on campus. It was one of those really hot Texas sticky wicky days in the afternoon, and I met my roommate Claudia on second floor south. We had a little bit of time before dinner, and so Claudia asked me to go with her to Upper Campus to see the new Ruth Taylor Theater. So off we went. Soon we were there, standing in front of the Ruth Taylor Theater. Oh my, I'd never seen anything quite like that. It was still under construction. Well, Claudia wanted to take a closer peek. So we walked around the building and tried to get in. The doors were locked, no luck. Wait a minute. Claudia found that unlocked door, and we quietly walked in and found ourselves in the shop. It was so quiet. We tiptoed around. You could hear a pin drop. And soon we found the entrance to the backstage. Well, I followed Claudia onto the three-sided stage. It was dark and dimly lit, except for that single light bulb hanging far above us from the ceiling, illuminating the stage. It was enormous. I'd never seen anything quite like it. And then we looked out over the empty space and up into the bleacher area and spotted somebody was sitting there quietly looking at us in the darkness. And Claudia shouted out, "What ho!" And then she started walking up to the bleachers and she met that person in their seat, and Claudia introduced us. She said she was from the Ruth Taylor Theater. And he said hi. He was Ed Herman from the Dallas Theater Center, and said that he was rehearsing that first play to open the theater. I was really impressed. Well, fall semester happened, and then it was time to register for a class. I needed 3 semester hours in the fine arts, and Claudia said, "Well, take Integration of Abilities, Drama 101. She said it would change my life. I registered, I took the class, and she was right. It changed my whole direction in my life. I became a drama major and later went on to graduate school at the Dallas Theater Center. Well, IA was held in the Ruth Taylor Theater because it was a big space. So first day of class, we walked in with 110 students. The stage was bare. Soon, Mr. Baker walked onto the stage. So that is Paul Baker, I said to myself. Well, he welcomed us with open arms. And he said, "This is a most unusual class." He said, "It's not a class about theater, nor is it about a class about theater practice. It's a class about you. It's a class about you discovering who you are as a creative person. All you have to help you is yourself and getting acquainted with the way you work. It's your class. There are no books. There are no tests, only exercises to do. So this is a class about learning about ourselves. How interesting, curious. And then he went on to say, he said, let me give you an example of what learning is so that you understand it. And I think you can do this with me in your homes, in front of your TV set. Hold out your hands like this, make a fist, grip them tightly, and now open them up. He said Frank Lloyd Wright told him that symbolized what learning was about. Well, my IA training has led me to a lifelong journey about learning so many things that I didn't think possible. And it took me to a lot of very interesting places because I thought I could apply IA to anything. So it was learning about learning, teaching, energy, collaboration, freedom, participating, that inner dialogue, learning about the critic that lives on my shoulder that tells me not to do that something or tells me that I'm not enough. It was about learning about the creative process, a process of change. It was about learning about asking questions. So what questions do you have? You know, those big questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose? Where am I going? About communication, about ideas. And now, most recently, a lot about the brain. I'll tell you about that in a moment. The one thing that I carry with me all the time is the elements of expression. Some call it the elements of form. Also, it's called the sensory learning vocabulary. You know that it's that first nonverbal language that we use to communicate with everything. And I bet you could repeat those with me. Say line, rhythm, color, texture, sound, space, shape, light, and movement. There's so much to learn. I began my teaching career or in working in arts education in 1965 when I became a teacher in the Denver Public Schools. And I taught sensory learning, integrated arts, and visual arts. Well, 15 years ago, I learned about something else. Body and brain, yoga, Tai Chi, and brain education from South Korea. I signed up for the classes and began to study and train. The classes reminded me so much of being in an integration of abilities class. I felt right at home because those classes were all about learning, personal growth, energy, change, inner dialogue, becoming the best I could be, and achieving my life's purpose. The experience also included learning about the 5-element theater, which connects so beautifully with the IA sensory vocabulary. So now I am a body and brain educator, practitioner, and instructor, and my interests are in history, theology, and the healing arts. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I hope you have a wonderful story as well.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you. What a fascinating life and experience with lifelong learning. Thank you so much. I can't wait to see some of the questions that might be asked of you, and a reminder for folks that you can post your questions in the Q&A chat, and we will be getting to them later. And now I would like to introduce our next panelist, Wes Dixon, class of 1975, who is now in his 40th year of a successful career in sales. Trinity was not the first place nor the last of Wes's theater experience, but, and I quote, it was the best anyone could have dreamed of. To Wes, Paul Baker's integration of abilities philosophy drove the conservatory environment and was the perfect complement to the Trinity plan of liberal arts education. Hello, Wes. Would you expand on that, please?
I would love to. This is so much fun. Wes Dixon, class of 75. I am the older I get, the more grateful I am to Trinity and Paul Baker and the theater and all the friends that I've made and we got reacquainted with about 5 years ago when anyway, I'll get to that. So I've got like 6 minutes here. So here's my life before Paul Baker in 57 seconds. I was an Army brat. We moved 11 times before I was 13. We had to make friends and learn who to avoid very quickly. Observation was the key. How the other kids acted, reacted to each other, their movements, their attitudes, their presence, all clues to keeping it, let's say, between the navigational beacons and out of trouble. On post schools, I was mostly successful. However, those skills of learning about friendship and not people that weren't going to be your friends quickly did not serve me well when we settled down. Dad got out of the service. I'm terrible at long-term relationships, and that caused a lot of friction with the kids who had been classmates their whole lives. I couldn't wait to leave. So that's it. Trinity found me quite by accident. That first semester, the theater department was doing Camelot, which was my favorite musical at the time. I landed a part in the chorus with a very small spotlight moment, and I was hooked. I didn't even know who Paul Baker was. I knew the Trinity plan, of course, 10 goals, liberal arts focus, but because of Camelot, I was looking forward to theater as my fine arts goal. So, second semester, I took integration of abilities because that's what you did. And looking back, it was from that point, that class, the book, the Paul Baker theater department in general, and that wonderful stage and Trinity, that my own philosophy started to come together. I was 17. What did I know, right? So it took a while, but the foundation that was laid in that first year, when I wasn't even a theater major, has been with me ever since. For me, IA, integration of abilities, was again, what Beth said, it's a freedom to explore and learn about yourself and study and practice using the elements of form. It was heavy on experimentation and observation, which I was pretty good at that, and awareness of the situation. IA was the very cornerstone of our 100 plus major department. Unheard of. I mean, in a small school like that, to have 100 theater majors. But the implementation of IA was wonderfully simple, and it was a bit devious. Every major spent a semester, sometimes more than one, in all the different areas of theater: acting, directing, design, costume, lights, props, stage management, so on, and there were others. But you have to have a common language in order to make that work. We were busy. We had a lot to do every year. And you have to have a common point of view as well. And IA gave us that basic vocabulary and, more importantly, a toolbox to get there. Very much like the Trinity plan itself. It was the perfect combination, like I said, but it had a twist. In 2016, some of us did have a Paul Baker Years reunion at Alumni Weekend, and we all got reacquainted. And of course, we ate at Earl Abel's, and we had a panel discussion with the current theater majors. And I was waiting for the rest of them to arrive, but that's all there were: 8, 10, 12. I forget how many. It was really a shock. And it was there. One of our classmates, Elaine Liner, was there. And she was the one that gave me the word conservatory for what we had there. And she was right. And I started wondering how that came to be. And I decided that it was probably because of IA, because we all had that foundation. So no matter what we've all done since, and in or out of theater, we're all connected with those same building blocks and that same cornerstone. Okay, so I had to tell you that story to tell you this one. Sales is very similar to theater, and that's where I ended up, because although I went to New York, I discovered very quickly I was not God's gift to the theater as I had anticipated to be accepted as. But sales is the same thing. Every client, every project, every sale has its own rhythm, has its own movement and sounds and silence and line, of course, and others. And each has its own actions to master in each one of those. The proposal, the hello, the first meeting, the subsequent meeting, everything has its own course. And that really helped to have IA in my background. It says, as an actor, your job is to discover the character, what the character has to say, beyond just the words, and why. That's your job, motivation. And that takes exploration, freedom, and practice, practice, practice. And as a salesperson in my life, my job is to discover the client's vision, his goals, her needs, wants, desires, and their motivations. And those are not obvious all the time either. So the exploration and practice comes in, and I've enjoyed that for 40 years. I guess I probably could have started with that part, could have been shorter. Anyway, that's me. And thank you, Salim. Thank you, Office of Alumni Relations and Trinity and Mr. Baker.
Awesome, Wes. Thank you so much. Well, you talk about a practical application. There are a lot of teachers and a lot of colleges that tell a lot of parents to kids who want to come to college that they are transferable skills that you learn in theater. You've just proved that, Wes. Thank you so much. Our next guest is Robyn Baker Flatt. Yes, one of the daughters of Paul Baker. She is the co-founder and executive artistic director of the Dallas Children's Theater, one of the largest professional children's theater companies in the nation. It reaches an audience of 250,000 youth annually, with 9 main stage productions, a national touring company, and its education programs. In 2004, Time magazine named it one of the top 5 theaters in the country performing for youth. Robyn was a member of Paul Baker's Trinity University graduate faculty at the Dallas Theater Center for 20 years. Robyn is going to begin by showing us a short video created by Dr. Laurie's grandson. Robyn, can you please introduce the video for us?
Yeah, thank you so much. This is really such a thrill to be here. And I just thank all of you and Trinity for having the wisdom, as my father would say, to focus on his teaching and the work and the wonderful ripple effect that's happened over the years. It's really just heartwarming to see it and to just visit it again. It's this very, very special time for me particularly, and I think for all of us. You mentioned just as a lead in here, you were saying that the Dallas Children's Theater reaches 250,000, and yes, that's been the case for many years until COVID hit. So when COVID hit, suddenly everything stopped. We were 3 days from opening a new show, and we had to send everybody home, shut down the theater. And we're still in, the trying to ramp back up situation. So what do we do in a situation like this? How do we continue to reach young people? How do we continue to serve? And so I said, well, the Baker work really is an exploration of yourself. So maybe this is something we can do, kids could do independently in a virtual learning situation. So the next thing I thought about, well, how do we make this interesting? So immediately I thought, I have a wonderful nephew, Jamie Laurie, who is a rap artist and a musician. So I'm going to call on him to see if he would help me put into a visual and auditory format something about one of the elements of form, space.
Space. Space. What makes space? Space. What makes space? Space. 4 lines make a square, make a wall. 4 walls make a room, make a place, make a stall. A picture frame makes a canvas. That's a blank space where you can draw. This is Texas, this is Kansas, this is Mexico and Arkansas. This is outer space, this is a circle without a face. Open your mouth, inhale, feel expansion. Exhale, make a fan spin. And what takes more space? A mountain range or a canyon? A compliment or an insult? When you're standing still or when you're dancing? How do you see space? Is it only in between the lines? How do you touch space? Do you spin around? Do you climb? How do you hear space? With an echo or a boom? How do you smell the space when the milk's rotten in the room? How do you taste the space? Well, you don't hear that one very often. Maybe it tastes like dust, or maybe it tastes like cherry blossoms. How do you travel through space? Do you fall down? Do you jump up and get carried off? Or when you fly around, are you Harry Potter? Are you Mary Poppins? Every day you move space, you take space, you use space, you feel space, you view space, both old space and new space. Your body lives inside space, you require space, you breathe space. Your sleep space is you sideways. When you lie down, you don't need space to go high. And when you stand up, you don't need space to be wide. But you can't lie down on a motorcycle or stand up on a bike. Sometimes people need more space. Sometimes you need your space. Sometimes you want windows closed. Sometimes you want to open doorways. Imagine it's only you in this room, just you and nobody else. Does it feel more like a punishment or a privilege to be by yourself? Does the space feel lonely? Does the space feel exciting? Does the space feel boring? Does the space feel inviting? What's the space where you want to be? On a Monday, on a Friday, on a Sunday, on a Saturday? When you're hungry, when you're riding, when you're happy, when you're sad? Or maybe when you're wondering what to do? What kind of space helps you feel like you? What kind of space helps you feel like you?
So, so that's one of the elements of form, as we know, space, and that was one of the exercises that my dad always started off with in integration of abilities. He asked people, "What is a stage?" And we would all struggle to come up with that answer. And finally, he says, "It's an empty space." And then he went on to talk about how you define that empty space, how you as an actor step into that empty space. But he also developed, after he retired, he became very interested in the sensory vocabulary and realized that the only way we receive information is through our senses. And that the senses and these elements of form are very closely linked. And so he started working with an elementary school, and in fact, started working very much the way that my mother, Kitty Baker, and Janine Wagner worked when they developed the whole system of learning about learning, where the kids would explore each of the elements of form. So I took that then and said, okay, we're going to develop some units of study around space. And I brought together a group of actors. And in addition to Jamie's wonderful video, then we had them explore different spaces, that they liked big spaces, they liked little spaces, or they liked messy spaces, or, they wanted, so he had a lot of fun with that, and we taped it. So we now have that as a, like about a 8 or 10 minute video that can be shown in the classroom, or it could be shown virtually so that kids at home could watch it. And then afterwards, they can discover what is the space, what space makes me feel like me? what is my kind of space? And then we went on into the rhythm, went on into line and shape, on into texture and color in each of those. So we have now 7 units of study that are being used right now in DISD elementary schools. I'm doing a workshop next month for about 12 elementary school teachers to help them work through them, but they're taking the whole year to spread these units out. I'm so excited about that, particularly because this is the only time this kind of work is one of the few times that students really get to figure out who they are. They get to discover that they are an expert. They get to discover that they are an authority on something. And when you bring a child to a space and they have a sense that they have an answer, this puts them in that driver's seat for their learning. And this is exactly what Ken Bain is talking about when he recognizes integration of abilities as being one of these super courses. And a course for now and the future is because our students have to find out who they are. They have to find out what are their strengths and understand how they learn. And teachers need to know how they learn. And then the rest of it can fit easily into place. And what we do is, if the child understands, like for instance, with sound, I think that's the easiest one to explain. If you start out with the kids say, well, what are the sounds you hear around you right now? And the children think about that. No, I hear a clock ticking, I hear motors running, I hear a car backfiring, I hear an airplane, I hear this. And so they make up a long list of things they hear. And if that's authentic. They know what they just heard. You don't have to say you're right or you're wrong. This is your experience. Then you say, what are the sounds you hear at home in the morning? What are the sounds you hear when you go on a vacation? And so all of that is authentic information. All of that puts them in the driver's seat of authority. Then when they start studying a story or a period of history from a different time, you can ask them, okay, did they hear airplanes? Oh no, the airplane wasn't invented. Well, did they hear horses? Yeah, that's how people got around. So they come up then with a list of sounds that connect them, that are part of the other period, but they understand something about what sounds mean, how that affect them, and it gives them an entree into this other period that is unique, that is personal, and puts them in the driver's seat of learning that about that period. And once you turn them on like that, boom, they're ready to learn.
That's right. That's right. You've ignited something that will never stop. I really appreciated your use of the word authority, giving them authority in their own life. How phenomenal. Robyn, thank you so much for continuing the legacy and for evolving in the work as we all have. Such a pleasure and an honor to have you here. I have a couple more ideas to share, and then we will go into our Q&A. If you have further questions for Robyn, please do write it in your Q&A section on your Zoom screen. So now that we have shared our personal takeaways, we would like to offer you the following thoughts and questions and suggestions for all of us that might continue to enhance a more conscious, creative experience. One, it's a reminder. Integration of abilities and theater is what? A place for ideas. How can we use our life experiences to enrich our personal lives and to pass it on to others? Two, lens for life. Drop the self-judgment. let yourself do for the joy of doing, not for how well you're doing. 3, how to gain power as a person, as an expressive person, to enrich your life. 4, learning about learning, how to stimulate vibrancy. What does the word vibrancy mean to you? 5, that creativity equals ordering info, your unique and personal info, bringing order to chaos. How do you personally, creatively bring order to chaos? So that is our food for thought questions for you. Now it is time for our Q&A. Let's take a look here. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and list 3 questions here, and then we'll take them one at a time. So the first is specifically for Joan from Sydney Ferrier. Please talk a bit about the barriers you experienced in bringing IA to public education. Sydney also asks, did any of you find IA intimidating? I was quite good at rote learning, but found the experience of IA challenging and a bit fearful. Barry Cleveland says, like Beth, my grad work was grounded in 20th century realism. Although even in that environment, I was still able to use IA for my personal process. Did anyone have success in engaging colleagues in IA concepts when mounting productions? My only success was in small directing projects. So let's go back to Joan. Please talk a bit about the barriers you experienced in bringing IA to public education. And you need to unmute. The unmute button.
There we go. Unmute. Okay, now I'm unmute. Well, as a teacher starting out in the Denver Public Schools, I knew I could give IA, I could implement that. And it was a challenge. As a sensory learning teacher at Smith Renaissance Academy in the Denver Public Schools, that's what I was hired to do, sensory learning. And I thought I had a handle on what that was. And we did teacher training, we introduced the vocabulary, and yet I was confronted with the arts education or specials education, which was basically stop and drop the kids off, and then you do art with the kids, art project. And that was not my idea. And that was not the idea of the principal, but that was a bit of a challenge. Some teachers were very, very open to that. And we did amazing projects. And then they decided that they didn't want to have arts in the school the next year. And so I went to another school, and that school, a teacher, a principal, who just loved the integration idea, and she really got it. She let me work with the teachers got it, we worked together, and it was integrated arts. And that was very successful. Then, let's see, Robyn will remember this, with the Idea Institute, when you debuted the, Cindy's book on the elements. And so I got to go to Dallas to that workshop, and I came back and I said, I am going to do that at my school, Swansea Elementary School. And I had a wonderful principal and wonderful curriculum people. And I went to them and I said, I'm going to suspend the visual art curriculum and do this integration of abilities. And so the whole school, there were about 500 kids in the school, pre-K to 5th grade. And so for almost 12 weeks, we worked each vocabulary word. Oh, I gotta stop. Okay. And anyway, it was remarkable. Awesome. I could go on and show you.
And
Oh, sorry.
I'm actually hoping that we'll have a future forum for being able to go on more
Okay.
and more and more. Yeah, I haven't even begun to ask you all the questions I want to ask you, Joan. So let me ask all of us panelists to give our best 15-second answer to the next question. Did you ever find studying IA intimidating? Was hard for some people? Was it easy, hard for you? Was it intimidating? I'll start. I loved it. I found a sense of freedom that I didn't know existed. I found myself there. Next.
I thought it was weird at first, like really weird. And then I just loved it. And I've been at home. That's where I live. I live in integration of abilities. I live with those vocabulary words. And they have served me well. But initially it was really weird. What do you mean walk out a line? Now the rhythm. So anyway.
Yes. Cool. Yeah, the right side of the brain doesn't do well with this non-logical. The right side of the brain does really well with the non-logical stuff, but that's what we hope to talk to you about at some point. Wes, what do you think? What was it like for you?
It was weird. Absolutely. My high school was so traditional and so between very narrow navigational beacons, to use my analogy from before, or is that a metaphor? I can never remember. Anyway. But once I got into it, once I gave myself permission to get into it, it was the freedom, that the way you said freedom, Beth, early in this was perfect.
It was so good.
Wow, it was great.
Yes,
I got a
cool.
little weird at first.
Awesome. Robyn, I guess you grew up in all of this.
Well, he started the children's theater for me right after the war. So that was like in the 3rd grade. So I was being introduced to these concepts all along. But I think with integration for me is where I really discovered that I'm a kinetic learner. And that was very important that because I'm always intimidated, these people that sit down and they plot out everything and they know exactly how they're going to direct the scene or do this thing, but before they even go into rehearsal. And I have to get my hands on it. I have to move with it. I have to walk through it. That's how I discover, the path. And I get there, but it's diametrically opposed to the people that already have all the answers.
Right.
And I always feel a little,
Well,
it
they
takes
think
me
they
longer
do.
and I'm intimidated. So.
Interesting. Robyn, I know so much of your theatrical and professional work has been through the theater center and through the children's theater. Did you have many opportunities to work in theaters outside theater companies whose shape was based on integration of abilities? And if so, was that easy or challenging?
Well, I don't know if I can answer that exactly. I went straight from being at Baylor to Trinity to the theater center in Dallas, and was actually there when the transition went from Baylor to Trinity. And then I was on the faculty. I was at the theater center, until 1984, and then I immediately started the Dallas Children's Theater. So I really, I've done little things here and there with and mostly what I've done is collaborations with other groups. And I've had the fabulous opportunity to work with different companies in Dallas, different companies in different parts of the country. So that's been very exciting. But I've not really gone and directed, solely for say like 6 months or something at another theater.
Right. I was interested in Barry's question. I know that for me, of course, I moved to Boston. I was way far away. I was way far away from, before I moved to New York, way far away from anybody that had studied the process with me. And bit by bit, it moved out of my vocabulary. But over these last couple of years, it has it has come back. And, you know, is one of the reasons, Robyn, that I wanted to ask you, are you still teaching it in the same way that you did, you know, 40 years ago? Has it evolved? How are the kids still responding to it?
I find it is the most amazing way to work with students or teachers, because you can start at almost any point along the line. I mean, if, you know, I'm kinetic, so I like to start with the movement sort of thing. But a lot of times I'm in a situation where we can't do movement. So we start with a writing exercise. I love this. I mean, my sister Sally Laurie, who is I think she may be on this webinar, and she's a graduate of Trinity. She has a wonderful way of starting with people's play space. And out of the play space, then you look at the rhythm in your play space. You look at the textures, you know, you look at all those different components. I just did a very quick intro the other day, where I had people just think of a happy place they enjoyed. And they wrote about that a few sentences. And then I said, okay, go back now and think about all the sounds. Now go back and layer in the rhythm of the place. Now layer in, you know, so I added it all in, and so that they ended then with, you know, this wonderful memory. They were all just so excited and smiling. And I mean, that was a totally different, I'd never started it that way exactly before. But, you know, it just, because you're starting with the individual, you're starting with their, you know, their vocabulary, their data that they've collected all these years. And if you start reaching and touching that, something comes alive in people.
Yes.
And their faces change, their rhythm changes. They open their hands. Instead of, they come in, you know, with a little fist. Now, what is this strange person going to do to me today?
And those hands
it changes, you know?
Robyn, another question came in for you. Teresa McVigor Holden asked,
Hi, Teresa.
yeah, she asks, are you open to having other schools use your wonderful new exploration of
We
the
would
forms?
love that. We would love that. In fact, we're working with an editor, just signed a contract to work with an editor to go through them and streamline it a little bit more, because we had to do this during COVID and we did it super fast. But they needs a little editing. But yes, we really would love to have other schools use that, because they're, you know, I think it's a brilliant way to work, and I know kids relate to it. And I know teachers, you know, like that boost. We used to be able to go into schools and do it in person with them. Well, we can't do that now. So this gives you an alternative. Also, if you don't have as a school the budget to bring in artists to introduce these elements of form.
Yes.
You know,
yes,
yeah.
It's one of the silver linings in the COVID cloud, is that all the different ways that we have figured out of being able to reach out. We've got some other questions that have come in. We're going to be running out of time soon. So let me address the questions and then we'll see where it takes us. Sally asks, why do you think so many educators are resistant to the idea that every child has genius? Miriam Unger says, as Joan's colleague in DPS, she always used IA in her own teachings and students. We have learned an incredible amount of IA from her. Thank you, Joan. She still continues. Glenda Weir, and Glenda, I'm so sorry, I can't remember your married name at the moment, but it just says Glenda here. I was blessed to teach at the Learning About Learning Center. Where can one find those materials today? What is similar in materials available today? Let me get these couple more questions, at least so that people can know that they're heard. Betty Ryder says, my integration of abilities class textbook and class notes, etc., are always in my office desk. It's a great force. Betty Ryder, 1969. And by the way, hi, Joan. Sydney Ferrier says, my later life's work has been with people who have Alzheimer's and other cognitive disease. And due to the cognitive impairment, what they have left are their sensory experiences. So I have attempted to bring IA to my work with them. Amanda Rudolph says, what are ways that you have worked with high school teachers to utilize IA? So I know that's a lot. Can we address, what was that last question? Oh, and another one just came in. For Joan, you're interested in theology. I have found an integration of abilities in clinical, pastoral, education, and spiritual direction, freedom, creativity, knowing one's best self for you too, and
Yes.
making one's unique contribution. So let's go to Glenda's question about the materials, the Learning About Learning Center. Where can I find those materials today, and what is similar in materials available today?
I have a lot of the IA materials. I'm sure Joan does too. I integrated a lot of that into my 7 units. We call them sensory search. The seven sensory search units. So if I'd be happy to talk further with whoever. Maybe we should put our contacts into the chat or something. If anyone, mine is Robyn.Flatt at DCT for Dallas Children's Theater.org. ROBYN, Robyn.Flatt at DCT.org.
Good, excellent. And I think, let's see, Teresa Holden says, hi, Joan. We started Trinity together, and like you, I have used IA in every stage of all my work for 38 years. Blessings to Dr. Baker. Amanda says, what are ways that you have worked with high school teachers to utilize IA? And that's an open question.
Well, it's being taught at Booker T. Washington High School to all juniors, the course. And as a result, we needed to republish the book, and they said we needed updated pictures. So we took pictures of the students at Booker T, and this is just an updated version of the original book. I mean, the text is the same. It's got more recent pictures. And you can also get this through Dramatic Publishing, or you can contact the Children's Theater.
Excellent. And I think for anyone else that has more specific questions of the panelists, I would suggest getting in touch with Salim at Trinity, and he'll be more than happy to make sure that we all stay connected in this way, because you know what, this is the beginning of the conversation. And Barry had asked earlier, and I had insinuated that there was a period of time where integration of abilities was the cornerstone for me. And I moved out of town and I learned other techniques, and it was pushed away, but it's coming back now. And it feels to me that culturally it is time for it to come back now. So I'm really interested in us continuing the conversation. I'm looking at the clock. I know we need to wrap up. So I've got some final thoughts for you. For most of us here, panelists as well as audience, it has been decades since we studied the integration of abilities system with Paul Baker. With the lens of time, it's significant to reflect on how we, in fact, have integrated the system and have integrated our own unique abilities to enhance our quality of life. Enjoy this reflection process. And from this reflection, now might be a good time to renew or update our choices for living and learning creatively. I hope you all, everybody here, I'll be a Texan. I hope y'all have enjoyed this webinar discussion on the legendary Paul Baker, 32, and his philosophy of integration of abilities. I would like to thank Trinity University's vibrant and supportive Office of Alumni Relations, and especially to Salim Sharif for his enthusiasm, for embracing ideas, and for the love of lifelong learning for the Trinity community. And of course, for additional learning together content, including other webinars, podcasts, and book club information, please visit the Lifelong Learning page on the Alumni site. Thank you all, folks, for spending your time with us this evening. Farewell, be creative. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Salim. Thank you, Trinity. Thank you, Paul Baker. Thank you.